My son said, "Don't call yourself our mother anymore." So I called the realtor. The room smelled of lemon polish and reheated gravy, the kind of smell that tries to pretend everything is all right, even when it is not. And I wiped the last plate and set it on the stack with hands that remembered 100 finer motions and 1,000 smaller mercies. My fingers traced the nick in the table where Edward carved our initials the summer we built the barn. It felt like a scar that still remembered our life. Ryan was laughing about listing the house online next spring, and Melissa was answering with that clipped little chuckle she always used when she wanted to sound amused but meant to sting. Around them, the crystal caught the dining room light and threw it back as if it were applauding. I felt like a mute at my own celebration. "You are not my mother anymore, Clara," Ryan said as he reached for the keys on the bowl where I had set them down that morning. His voice had a new, practiced cruelty in it, the kind men learn when they want to make a break seem like a kindness. "You are just an old woman squatting in my future." Melissa's eyes, bright with the thrill of a plan, skimmed the house, our house, as if it were a prize announcement. "We already called the realtor," she said, slow and glossy. "You can keep your memories, we will take the house." They said it like a gift. They said it like a sentence. I moved for the bowl because it was habit, because bones remember what hearts forget, and Ryan's hand came down with a shove that knocked me back against the chair and sent the silver fork skittering. He leaned over me and his breath smelled of the beer he pretended he never drank at noon. "Sign it or fall again," he said, the threat in his voice a simple ledger entry, numbers and consequences. "Either way, it is mine." The room spun with the sound of their laughter, small and clean and satisfied, and the photograph of Edward on the mantel looked at me with the same gentle surprise he had when I first taught him how to solder a connector that refused to behave. He would have known what to do. He would have said, "Don't let their impatience become your silence." Instead, I sat there with my teeth tight and the world pressing like a fist against the side of my head and thought, for the first time in a long time, of being seen as an object rather than a person. The indignity was not only that they thought me weak, but that they were proud of the exact moment they proved it to me. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I said nothing, then words felt like currency, and I'd already learned the accounting of my life. Give too much, and you end up bankrupt of self. I stood slowly, fingers still on the edge of the table, and when Melissa reached to collect the bowl of keys, her hand brushed mine in passing, as if checking I was accounted for, like a warden tallying breakfast. "She will not remember this tomorrow," she said to one of her friends with the cruel certainty of the young who have never been disappointed by their own cruelty. "Old people forget fast." The statement landed like a stone and did something to the house. It echoed back at me from the staircase, from the banister my father hand-planed, from the hinge that squeaked in a way that always made Edward chuckle because it sounded like a dog clearing its throat. I picked up the photograph from the mantel not to stare at his face so much as to feel the wood warmed by his presence and whispered to the empty room, "You took my voice." But walls remember what people forget. They had always said that marriage was a shared ledger. 2 names, 2 signatures, a lifetime of small ledgers balanced. Edward and I had built this ledger together, bracing joists, arguing about paint, sharing wages and nights, and the stubborn work of staying married. When he died, the work of remembering the accounts of us did not evaporate. It was left like an unpaid bill on the counter. I had been careful with the accounts. That is what you do when your life is made of measured things. I had kept ledgers, passwords, copies, and an old habit of backing up the little that mattered in places the world did not think to look. When they crowded me toward the second-hand couch in the basement and called it a practical arrangement, when they changed locks and left polite post-it notes about medication schedules, I listened. I listened the way my old job taught me to listen, filtering static, recording details that mattered, logging each attempt to take more than was offered. I did not raise my voice again. I made tea that night and poured a cup for Edward's photograph and left another on the kitchen table for whoever came back to take what they thought they had earned. I folded the deed and slid it into the drawer where we kept tax receipts and the little screwdriver Edward used to fix telephones. Then I took the long, careful walk to the back room where my old equipment sat outdated, obsolete, the kind of things men at the repair shop had called relics when they saw my hands work. Those relics listened. They remembered signals, kept echoes. Clara Jennings had once wired a switchboard with more patience than most people held grudges. I dusted the boxes, plugged in old cords, and smiled a small, quiet smile because the house had started to lean with me toward what came next. When I was young, I believed working meant loving in a different language. Wires, switches, and circuits, those were my sentences. In the 1,970 seconds, being a woman in the engineering room at AT&T was a little like being a ghost in a cathedral. You could hear everything, but you were never quite seen. Still, I stayed. I learned to make sense of noise. I came home with copper stains on my fingers and the quiet pride of someone who could fix things that no one else understood. Ryan hated the smell of solder. He said it clung to his clothes when I kissed him goodnight. He was 10 when he first asked why I liked my job more than him. I told him, "I like that my job keeps the lights on." He said, "I'd rather they went out if it meant you stayed." He didn't understand that women like me were told staying home was the same as giving up, and that keeping the lights on was a form of love. Years later, when Edward died, the lights didn't go out. They just grew dimmer. Ryan came back with a moving truck, all kindness and condescension. "You shouldn't live alone," he said. "You'll fall or forget something important." His wife, Melissa, stood behind him like someone inspecting a charity case, her perfume bright and thin. They called it taking care, but the first week I realized they had replaced all my kitchen chairs with folding ones and moved my sewing desk to the basement. "Just for space," Melissa said. Space for them meant erasing pieces of me. They told the neighbors I was getting forgetful. I wasn't. I remembered every word, every small theft of dignity. "You're lucky we let you stay here rent-free," Melissa told me once while measuring the dining room wall for a flat screen. "That's charity, you know." I laughed then because the word charity sounded like a brand name for cruelty wrapped in kindness. The rent had been paid for 40 years. The deed bore my name in ink that didn't fade. I stopped arguing. Silence unsettled them more. That was when I noticed the tiny red dot in the corner of the living room, one of those elder safety cameras they had bought. "So we can make sure you're okay," Ryan said, smiling the way men do when they think control is concern. But when I checked the system, I saw the feed went straight to their phones, not to any emergency service. Every night I heard the faint click of the upstairs floorboards when they watched the footage. Old habits returned. I had spent decades troubleshooting lines, finding the whisper inside the noise. I learned again to listen. I traced the signal from their camera, found the storage server, and built a bridge of my own, a quiet echo chamber. Every time they checked the footage, a copy was sent to a drive only I could reach. Data is loyal when people aren't. The first time Melissa told her friends I was losing it, the drive recorded her voice as clearly as a confession. The second time, when Ryan said I was too old to understand legal papers, it caught that too. I never told them. I smiled and poured coffee, counted their footsteps, measured their contempt. One evening, Ryan stood at the doorway holding a clipboard. "Mom," he said, using the word like a prop, "this will make everything easier for you, just a form so we can handle the bills." I took the pen and signed something entirely different. A note in my own code, hidden where no one but a technician would ever look. I felt my old self stir, the woman who once connected hundreds of voices through copper and patience. Hate, I learned, doesn't appear overnight. It grows like mold in corners left uncleaned. Ryan's resentment had started the day I refused to quit my job after he was born. Melissa's hatred bloomed when she realized I didn't admire her designer handbags as much as her credit card debt. They said I was cold, but really I was consistent. I never raised my voice, and that made theirs sound louder, uglier, like static across a line that needed grounding. When Edward died, I found his last message tucked inside a toolbox. "You can fix anything if you stay calm enough to find the wire that's loose." He was right. The wire was loose, not gone. I only had to trace it back. So I watched them. I let them plan. Every night, as they laughed upstairs about Airbnb listings and future profits, I documented everything. The network blinked with red lights, small digital heartbeats marking each insult, each scheme. They thought I was shrinking into the wallpaper, but I was mapping every fault line beneath our roof. People think revenge is rage. It isn't. It's patience pretending to be forgetfulness. And I had learned patience in the hum of long-distance calls, in the pauses between signals, in the space where no one expects sound but everything still listens. The cameras kept recording, and so did I. The house had become my circuit again, every beam a wire, every wall a transmitter. I realized that if they wanted to use this place to erase me, they would have to do it under its gaze. What they forgot was that even silence leaves a trace, a faint electric pulse of truth waiting for the right frequency to make it speak. When I went to bed that night, the screen on my desk blinked once, an automatic backup completed successfully. It meant every insult, every threat, every manipulation now lived somewhere they couldn't reach. I turned off the lamp and let the hum of the router fill the room like a lullaby. The line was open, the walls were listening, and soon so would everyone else. The day they brought the realtor over, the house felt colder than the Kentucky winter pressing against its windows. Ryan wore a pressed shirt he had never earned, and Melissa had that clipped, rehearsed smile people practice before they lie. The realtor, a man with expensive shoes and the posture of someone used to dealing with grief as an investment, unfolded his papers across my dining table. I had polished that table for 45 years. It looked strange with their pens on it. "Mrs. Jennings," the man said kindly, "your son tells me you're ready to move into assisted living. This will make things easier." I smiled because I had learned that silence works better than argument. Ryan put his hand on my shoulder as if I might wander off. "She's senile," he said, glancing at Melissa. "We'll say she forgot she signed it." He said it casually, like he was ordering lunch. They passed the pages back and forth, his name already printed neatly beside mine under the word co-owner. Years ago, I had added him to the deed to make probate easier. Back then, I thought trust was the same as love. I watched him sign both his name and mine in one long stroke. My hand twitched, but I didn't move. The sound of his pen scratching over my name was like a shovel against stone. When it was done, the realtor smiled that neutral, professional smile. "Congratulations," he said. "I'll start the listing process this week." Melissa clapped her hands softly, her rings catching the light. "Finally," she whispered. "Progress." I thought about correcting her, that progress is supposed to move you forward, not erase where you came from, but I let it pass. That night, I made tea in the dark. The floor creaked above me, their laughter fell through the vents like crumbs. I walked to the cabinet where Edward's old toolbox sat. Under the wrenches and screws was something I hadn't touched in decades. A line bridge recorder from my days at AT&T, still wrapped in cloth. Most people would have called it junk. To me, it was memory. I took it out, wiped off the dust, and studied the ports. Technology had moved on, but sound is sound, it only needs a wire and a path. I connected it to the router, the same one they use to stream their shows and track my well-being. A small red light blinked, steady as a pulse. Then I spoke to the house, to Edward, to whatever piece of him still lived in the beams he'd nailed with his own hands. "You wanted to sell my home," I said softly, "so I made sure it could speak before you did." I adjusted the input levels, remembering how to balance a line so it caught every whisper without distortion. The hum of the old recorder, mixed with the Wi-Fi's low buzz, past and present syncing like two voices learning to harmonize. The first file appeared almost instantly. Their conversation upstairs, muffled but clear enough to recognize the words "power of attorney," "liquidate," and "before she dies." I saved it. Then another followed, Melissa laughing. "She won't even know until the boxes show up." Saved. At midnight, I uploaded the files to a cloud account under a name no one would trace, EJ 1945, Edward Jennings. I added encryption because I still believed in careful work, even for revenge. I didn't sleep. I walked the hall, touching each wall as if greeting an old friend. Every creak, every shadow, every nail remembered something of us. Ryan thought he owned the house because his name was printed beside mine. But ink is temporary. Memory is permanent. The next morning, they talked about staging furniture for photos. I nodded when they spoke, poured coffee, and pretended to mishear questions. "She's getting worse," Melissa whispered, not realizing the microphone near the lamp was still live. I smiled into my cup. "Getting worse? No. Just quieter. Quieter is dangerous." Later, I printed out one of the recordings and mailed a copy to the bank manager who had handled Edward's estate, an old friend who owed me a favor. I enclosed a note. "Keep this safe. If anything happens to me, send it to the county clerk." The old habits of engineering came back easily. Backup, redundancy, fail-safes. Every system needs one. When the sun went down, I sat on the porch with the house lights off, listening to the faint hum of the recorder through the open window. It sounded like breathing. I thought of the switchboards I used to maintain, how every connection had a purpose, every voice a trace. I realized this house was just a larger circuit, full of signals waiting to be carried. I only had to make sure the right people heard them. I looked up at the window where Ryan's shadow moved across the curtains, gesturing to Melissa, probably bragging about his cleverness. He didn't know the house was already transmitting every word to a server he couldn't find. He didn't know the house had chosen its side. I whispered again. "You think you're clever, my boy, but the wires still run through my hands." The red light blinked. Upstairs, laughter rose again, bright, cruel, and fleeting. I didn't mind. By morning, the house would remember everything they said, every plan they made, every lie they told. And when the time came, it would repeat them loud enough for the whole world to hear. The morning smelled like polish and panic. Ryan had spent an hour straightening his tie, rehearsing charm in the hallway mirror, while Melissa sprayed perfume like she was preparing for a courtroom instead of a sale. The realtor arrived right on time, bringing with him a young couple, potential buyers, he called them, though their eyes darted around too much for innocence. The woman clutched a clipboard. The man had that neutral stance only professionals learn. I knew a test when I saw one. I sat quietly in my armchair by the window, knitting in my lap, the recorder's tiny light hidden behind a stack of books. Ryan's voice came out sugar slick. "We're so happy to finally move forward. This house has served its time." His hand trembled only a little when he took the pen. Melissa stood beside him, smiling like a woman trying to keep her teeth from chattering. The realtor laid out the final contract, sliding it toward him. "You'll just need to sign here, Mr. Jennings, and here for your mother, since you have her authorization." He glanced at me, testing for reaction. I gave none. My hands stayed steady, looping yarn over needle, one stitch, then another. Then, as the pen touched the paper, the television flickered to life. No one had touched the remote. The realtor frowned, startled. "Is that?" The screen bloomed from black to color. A timestamp glowed in the corner, 10:48 p.m., the night before. Ryan's voice filled the room. "We'll fake her signature. She's too old to notice." Melissa's laugh followed, clear as crystal. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be sipping champagne in Nashville." The air went still. The only sound left was the whir of the ceiling fan and the faint, relentless voice of their own betrayal echoing back at them. Ryan froze mid-signature. The pen slipped from his fingers. Melissa turned white, then red, then white again. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, rushing toward the TV. "Who's doing this?" Her hand slammed against the power button, but the image didn't fade. The video looped Ryan's voice again, slower this time, clearer. "We'll fake her signature. She's too old to notice." Then the screen changed. The image cut to a live feed of video call. My face appeared, framed by the bright white walls of a police station. Behind me, an officer in uniform nodded to someone off-screen. I smiled, small and steady. "You said I was a ghost in this house," I said, my voice carrying through the speakers. "Well, ghosts call back." Melissa stumbled backward. How did you?" "Old habits," I said. "You remember what I used to do for a living, don't you?" The officer beside me stepped into view. "Mrs. Clara Jennings came in early this morning to file a report. She provided us with direct recordings of a planned act of fraud and forgery. She also set a timed signal to alert us once the sale began. That alert was linked to the house's network, an automatic trigger, Mrs. Jennings programmed herself, timed precisely to activate when her son started signing the papers. The doorbell rang. No one moved. The officer at my side gave a faint smile through the screen. That should be my colleagues. Ryan Jennings, one said, voice calm and practiced. You are under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery of legal documents, and elder financial abuse. This is insane, she gasped. She's framing us. The TV answered for me. The footage played again, Ryan's voice, Melissa's laughter. The house seemed to breathe with the sound, every wall echoing their words back at them. You wanted to sell my home, I said quietly through the feed. I made sure it could speak before you did. The realtor stood frozen, clipboard trembling in his hands. The officers moved forward, reading Ryan his rights. Melissa screamed as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. This is our house, Ryan shouted, struggling. You can't do this. She's senile. The officer beside him tilted his head toward the screen. Funny, she didn't seem senile when she came in with 3 forms of evidence and a notarized copy of your forged signature. Melissa's knees buckled, her voice breaking into a sob. You don't understand. We were supposed to. I understand perfectly, I said. You were supposed to win. For a long moment, no one moved. The camera captured the silence, the wreckage of arrogance, the soft click of justice coming home. Ryan turned toward the screen, eyes burning. You ruined us. I met his gaze. No, I said. You did that when you stopped calling me Mom. The officers led them out, their shouts fading down the hall. The house fell quiet again, except for the soft crackle of static as the video call ended. I stared at my reflection in the blank television screen, the faint outline of an old woman who had once believed patience could heal anything. Maybe it still could, just not in the way I'd imagined. The realtor stood there, pale and silent. Mrs. Jennings, he said finally. I had no idea. I smiled faintly. Neither did they. He gathered his papers quickly, leaving them unsigned on the table, and slipped out the front door without another word. When the last car left the driveway, I walked to the router and unplugged the recorder. The light blinked twice before going dark, its work finished. Outside, the wind pushed gently at the porch swing, the same one Edward had built with his rough hands and stubborn heart. I sat down, listening to it creak softly, the sound as familiar as breath. Sometimes it arrives as an echo loud enough to fill the house you were never meant to leave. The courtroom smelled like old wood and coffee gone cold, a scent that always seems to follow judgment. Reporters filled the benches in the back, their pens twitching like nervous birds. Cameras weren't allowed, but that didn't stop the buzz of curiosity from filling the air. My son sat at the defendant's table, head high, jaw set, pretending to be the victim. Melissa dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her makeup smudged just enough to look sincere. The judge entered, a woman with sharp gray eyes and a voice that carried more weight than any gavel. Court is now in session. The Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Ryan and Melissa Jennings, charged with forgery, attempted real estate fraud, and elder abuse. I sat quietly beside the prosecutor. My cane leaned against the chair, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't feel like a warrior, just a witness. Ryan stood as his lawyer began his opening statement. Your Honor, the attorney said, with a smoothness that came from years of defending the guilty. This is not a case of greed or malice. This is a family misunderstanding. An elderly woman confused by her grief, misled by technology, and manipulated by those who want to see this family torn apart. He paused, letting the sympathy hang in the air. Then Ryan spoke. My mother has always had control issues, he said, his tone calm, almost reasonable. She set us up. She's been spying on us for months, recording everything, twisting it out of context. We tried to help her, but she's... He hesitated, letting the word linger. Unstable. Melissa sniffled beside him. I only ever wanted her love, she whispered, just loud enough for the court to hear. But she hated me from the start. I think she resented losing her son. Their performance would have been convincing to someone who didn't know the truth. But I had brought the truth in neat, time-stamped files. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the Commonwealth would like to present Exhibit A, audio and video recordings recovered from the Jennings residence. He gestured to the monitor. The recordings have been verified by an independent forensic technician. Metadata shows the files were uploaded automatically from the source device at the precise time of the alleged events. The lights dimmed. On the screen, the familiar living room appeared, the same one where I had once decorated Christmas trees and read bedtime stories. Then came Ryan's voice. "She's senile. We'll say she forgot she signed it." Melissa's laugh followed. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be sipping champagne in Nashville." The sound filled the courtroom like a confession carved in stone. Ryan shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Melissa's eyes darted toward the floor. The judge raised an eyebrow. "So," she said softly, "this is the confusion you mentioned?" Ryan's lawyer tried to object, but the sound of the recording cut through his words again, clear, undeniable. The prosecutor pressed play on another clip. Melissa's voice came next. "We just need her gone before the sale clears. She won't fight back." The audience murmured, the sound of disgust rippling through the room. The judge turned toward me. "Mrs. Jennings, may I ask why go through so much trouble? Most people your age would have gone to the police and waited." I looked up at her, my voice steady but quiet. "Because when people stop listening, Your Honor, the walls need to speak." For a moment, the room went completely still. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hold its breath. The judge leaned back, studying me. "You mean you anticipated this?" "I didn't anticipate it," I said. "I remembered it. My son used to say I loved machines more than people, but machines don't lie, and they don't forget." Melissa broke then. "You're sick," she shouted, tears streaking her face. "You planned all this just to humiliate us." The judge tapped her gavel once. "Mrs. Jennings didn't humiliate you, Miss Jennings. You did that yourself." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "She tricked us." The prosecutor replied coolly, "No, Mr. Jennings. She documented you." The judge motioned for silence. "The evidence speaks for itself. The recordings are authentic, and the timeline proves deliberate intent. This isn't misunderstanding, it's manipulation." Ryan's lawyer lowered his head. "Your Honor," he murmured, "the defense has no further questions." The prosecutor closed his folder, voice soft but final. "The Commonwealth rests, Your Honor." For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of rain began tapping against the windows, faint and rhythmic, as if the world itself was exhaling. The judge looked between the two defendants. "Ryan Jennings, Melissa Jennings. The law recognizes no bond stronger than family, but also no betrayal deeper than its abuse. You forged, deceived, and conspired against the one person who gave you everything you ever had, and she, in turn, gave you the only thing you deserve, the truth." Melissa wept silently. Ryan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tight his face trembled. The judge's gavel came down once, the sound ringing clean through the air. "The defendants are hereby found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will proceed next week." The courtroom erupted in whispers, but I didn't hear them. I was staring at the grain of the wooden floor, tracing each line like a memory. As the bailiff led them away, Ryan turned his head toward me. "You ruined your own family," he spat. I met his eyes and answered softly, "No." I just turned the sound back on. The judge's final words hung in the air as I stood to leave. "Justice doesn't need a knife. It only needs the truth, recorded and remembered." And in that still moment, I realized something Edward once told me was true. Some walls don't need to be torn down, they just need to be heard. The air inside the courtroom felt heavy that morning, as if even the walls were bracing for what was coming. The judge entered, her black robe moving like a shadow through light. Reporters filled the benches again, pens poised, eyes sharp. The prosecutor stood ready, his file closed. He didn't need to say another word. The evidence had already spoken. Ryan sat stiff at the defendant's table, his hands folded so tightly they'd gone pale. Melissa fidgeted beside him, staring at the floor as if she could fall through it. I sat behind them, cane across my knees, calm as the oak bench beneath me. I'd been through storms before. This one was almost peaceful. The judge adjusted her glasses and began. "This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony regarding the case of Ryan and Melissa Jennings versus the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It is clear that the defendants knowingly falsified legal documents, coerced an elderly family member, and attempted to defraud her of property ownership." Ryan's jaw clenched. Melissa sniffled. The words falsified, coerced, and defraud, echoed through the courtroom like hammer strikes. The judge continued, her tone measured but firm. Mr. Ryan Jennings, the court finds you guilty of forgery, coercion, and elder abuse. You are sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory restitution payments to Mrs. Clara Jennings, and full revocation of your co-ownership rights to the Jennings property. Gasps rippled across the room. Ryan's face went gray. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something he didn't hear. Mrs. Melissa Jennings, the judge went on, you are found guilty of complicity to fraud. You will pay financial penalties and are hereby barred from engaging in any form of real estate business within the Commonwealth for a period of 10 years. Melissa covered her face with both hands. Please, she sobbed, we were just desperate. The judge's voice softened but didn't bend. Desperation is no excuse for cruelty. The gavel came down once sharp, final. Ryan shot up, his chair screeching against the floor. You destroyed your own family, he shouted across the room. His voice cracked, the same boyish sound I remembered from years ago, when he used to cry after scraping his knees. You turned us into monsters. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane. No, son, I said, my voice clear and steady. You just recorded the moment you did. The courtroom fell silent again. Only the sound of cameras clicking broke the stillness. The judge motioned for order, but the moment had already shifted. There was no rage left in me, only the quiet truth that had been waiting years to breathe. I turned toward the door, each step lighter than the one before. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters and flashing lights. Someone shouted, Mrs. Jennings, how does it feel to win? I stopped, turning slightly. It's not about winning, I said. It's about remembering that silence doesn't mean consent. They scribbled the words down like scripture. I kept walking. By that evening, the first headlines hit every local channel. The grandma who let her house speak. Within a week, the story spread far beyond Kentucky. Talk shows debated it. Podcasts called it the rise of digital justice. Senior communities began organizing workshops on digital self-defense, citing my case as an example. One magazine described me as the woman who turned technology into armor. Another called me the ghost who made her house confess. I didn't care for either title, but I was glad for one thing: the story had stopped being just about me. It had become about every elder who'd been dismissed, silenced, or stolen from. Letters began arriving at my door, handwritten, shaky, sincere. One from Ohio read, You made me check my bank account today, and I caught my nephew moving funds I didn't approve. You saved me, Miss Clara. Another from Arizona said, I told my family, if Grandma Jennings can make her walls talk, so can I. I pinned those letters to the wall above my desk, beside Edward's old photo. Justice, I thought, doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a microphone and a heartbeat strong enough to keep recording. That night, I brewed tea, sat by the window, and watched the porch light flicker gently. The house creaked like it was exhaling, finally at peace. The world had called me the grandma who let her house speak, but I knew better. It wasn't the house that spoke. It was truth finally amplified loud enough for everyone to hear. The office in Louisville smelled of solder and coffee, a mix that made me feel 20 years younger. I sat beneath the AT&T Foundation banner that read, Second Line Project, Empowering Women Through Technology. The name made me smile. Once upon a time, I'd spent my life connecting voices through wires. Now, I was teaching women how to make those wires speak for themselves. There were a dozen of them in the room, some widows, some retirees, all carrying that same quiet mix of exhaustion and hope. They called me Miss Clara, though a few added ma'am out of habit. I didn't correct them. Respect, once gone, is too precious to interrupt. We were surrounded by laptops, old switchboards, and a few sleek new recording devices donated by the company. I held up a small black gadget no bigger than a matchbox. This, I said, isn't just a recorder, it's a witness. It doesn't forget. And when the world tells you you're wrong, this little thing remembers what really happened. A woman in her 60s raised her hand. So, You mean I can record my own son if he's threatening to take my car? I nodded gently. If you feel unsafe, you can document not to attack, but to protect. Because truth loves evidence. She smiled for the first time that morning, the kind of smile that carries both fear and relief. Another woman, younger, maybe 40, hesitated before speaking. Her voice trembled. My son forged my signature, she said softly. He took my retirement check and used it for his business. What should I do? The room went silent. You could feel the weight of her shame hanging like humidity. I leaned forward, my hands folded. Start recording, dear. Truth loves evidence, and evidence loves a calm voice. A few chuckles rippled through the group. Then she smiled too, a little braver. Behind me, a poster on the wall showed the slogan we'd written together. Justice isn't loud, it's clear. After class, I walked the hall with Mr. Patel, the foundation director, a kind man with sharp glasses and softer edges. Clara, he said, you know you've started a movement here, right? We're getting requests from seniors all over Kentucky. They want to learn your method. I laughed. It's not my method. It's just listening only this time. The machines help. He nodded thoughtfully. You turned your pain into a toolkit. That's rare. That night, the local news aired a short feature. The grandma who made her house talk now teaches others to make theirs listen. The segment showed me in front of a whiteboard, drawing diagrams of simple circuit loops. This little wire, I said on screen, connects to your truth. Don't underestimate it. The phone at the foundation rang nonstop for days. Calls from widows, veterans, even a few lawyers wanting to consult on ethical tech use for elder protection. They called it the Clara effect. But what mattered most to me were the letters. Handwritten ones, like before. One woman from Georgia wrote, "My daughter told me I was crazy." Then I showed her the recording of what she said last week. She apologized. "Thank you for giving me my sanity back." Another from Pennsylvania wrote, "I used your workshop to teach my church group. We all have our own listening walls now." Sometimes I read those letters aloud during class, and the room would grow quiet, except for the faint hum of equipment. It reminded me of the old AT&T switchboard's lines, humming with stories waiting to be connected. During one session, a teenager helping her grandmother with the tech asked me, "Mrs. Jennings, aren't you angry at your family? After all that?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. Anger's just grief that forgot its purpose. I used to want them to hear me. Now I just want others to hear themselves. Outside the window, Louisville's skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun. The faint reflection of my own face appeared in the glass, older, yes, but strong in a way I hadn't known before. Before leaving, I wrote a single sentence on the chalkboard for the next class. When voices are silenced, wires remember. And as I turned off the lights, the devices on the desks blinked once, a dozen tiny red dots glowing in the dark, like hearts beating in rhythm. That's when I realized the truth of it all. I hadn't built a classroom. I'd built an echo chamber for courage, and women were finally learning to speak through the static. The lights on the set of Good Morning America were brighter than I'd imagined, sharp, white, and almost surgical. A producer adjusted my microphone while another woman powdered my face. I caught my reflection in one of the cameras. A 78-year-old woman in a navy dress, silver hair pinned neatly back, a calmness in her eyes that only comes after surviving a storm. The host, a young woman with the kind of smile that can sell comfort, leaned in and said softly, "Just speak from the heart, Mrs. Jennings. People love you already." When the red light blinked on, the world went quiet. "Welcome back," the host said. "Our next guest is a woman whose story inspired millions across America. Mrs. Clara Jennings, once accused, once silenced, now the voice behind what people are calling digital justice." She turned toward me. "Mrs. Jennings, may I ask what went through your mind the day your son told you not to call yourself his mother anymore?" The question hung in the air. Cameras zoomed closer. Somewhere in the back row, someone sniffled. I smiled, steady and sure. "I thought," I said, "that if I wasn't his mother anymore, then I'd better become something better." His lesson. The audience gasped, then exhaled in a ripple of uneasy laughter, half admiration, half disbelief. The host blinked, then nodded. "That's profound." "Not really," I said. I just realized love without respect is a leash. When they cut it, I didn't fall. I walked away. Applause filled the studio. Some people stood. The host reached for my hand. You've inspired thousands, Mrs. Jennings. Seniors everywhere are learning how to protect themselves because of you. How does it feel to know your pain became power? I looked into the nearest camera, the red light flickering like a heartbeat. It feels like the line finally reconnected. You see, justice doesn't hang up. It just waits for someone brave enough to dial again. The applause grew louder, echoing off the studio walls. Somewhere between the clapping and the lights, I felt a stillness, the kind that used to live only in my empty house. But this time, it was peace, not loneliness. When the show ended, the host hugged me. Thank you, Clara, for reminding us that even silence has a signal. Outside, New York smelled like rain and car exhaust. My driver carried my bag to the terminal. I checked in for my flight to Louisville, seat 1A, as always. On the jet bridge, the flight attendant smiled at me. Traveling alone, ma'am? Not really, I said, fastening my coat. My dignity's coming with me. She laughed, genuine and bright. Best travel companion I've ever heard of. As the plane taxied down the runway, I looked out the window. The city shrank beneath a blanket of cloud and light. Somewhere far below were people still arguing, lying, hiding, and somewhere among them, maybe my son still learning what the truth sounds like when it finally calls back. The engines roared, lifting us higher. I pressed my palm to the window, watching the horizon burn gold. The world was wide again, full of signal, and I was connected to it all. In my bag sat a letter addressed to the Women of the Second Line Project. It read, "Never let them tell you silence is safety. Record what matters, speak when they say you can't, and never forget you are your own line of defense." As the clouds parted, I whispered to myself, not for the cameras, not for the headlines, just for me. They said this house had no voice, but it recorded the truth and spoke louder than they ever dared to. The seatbelt light chimed. The plane climbed into the open sky, sunlight washing across the cabin. For the first time in my long, noisy life, I felt nothing but quiet, and it was beautiful. And that, dear listeners, was the story of Clara Jennings, the woman whose house spoke louder than her son ever could. If her courage moved you, if you believe that truth, no matter how old, still finds a voice, then don't let this be where it ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing family at Grandma True Stories, where every tale reminds the world that wisdom doesn't fade with age and kindness is never weakness. And hey, if you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Help us keep stories like Clara's alive, echoing far, far away. Because here at Grandma True Stories, we don't just tell what happened. We honor those who refuse to be erased.